All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, Bryce Greer, and make sure to hit that subscribe, turn on the post notifications. We had a wild card weekend, and it was wild. Definitely was. So let's just get straight into it. First game of the weekend was Colts versus Bills. Bills ultimately ended up winning this game 27-24, but they really should not have. The Colts really hurt themselves, made a lot of big mistakes that ultimately ended up costing them the game. They had offsides at the end of the first half, which ended in a Josh Allen touchdown, and that really hurt them. They also went for it on fourth down on the 3-yard line, and they should have just taken the field goal. And then they also went for 2 when they were down 8. I don't know really why they would do that, but they did. Ultimately, Josh Allen ended with 324 yards, 2 TDs, 54 rushing yards, and another rushing touchdown. The only thing that scares me about the Bills is that they have no rush offense at all, really. I think this will ultimately hurt them in the long run because they only had 96 total rushing yards. 54 of them came from Josh Allen, so I think that's ultimately gonna hurt them in the long run. Next game was Rams versus Seahawks. The Rams took this one 30-20. I was really surprised by this. Honestly, I underestimated the Rams a lot. Aaron Donald in this defense is crazy. They're really good. They sacked Russell Wilson 5 times. But what really impressed me was Jared Goff. He comes in 12 days after thumb surgery. He still has pins in his thumb. He comes back 12 days after, and he leads them to a playoff victory over the Seahawks. Like, that takes guts, and I respect Jared Goff for that. Ultimately, the Seahawks played really sloppy. A lot of penalties, a lot of sacks. One thing I started really thinking about was, is Russell Wilson still elite? He had a great first half of the year. People were even talking about him as MVP and all this. But the second half of the year was awful. I mean, if you say that you're a dual threat quarterback, why are you getting sacked 5 times in a playoff game? 5 times. If you're a dual threat quarterback, you should never get sacked 5 times. You should be able to elude the pressure. Even throw it away if you have to. I mean, that's ridiculous in my opinion. One thing that scares me about the Rams is late in that game, Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald seemed a little bit injured. Hopefully they're good enough to go in the next game against the Packers. Next game of the weekend was Tampa Bay versus the Washington football team. The Buccaneers took this one 31-23, but let's talk about Heineke for a second. This dude comes in and he earned himself a contract. It might not be with Washington, but he earned himself a contract for sure. Heineke ended with 306 yards, 1 touchdown, and then 1 rushing touchdown. Brady ended up with 381 passing yards. And one thing I want to point out is Tom Brady is 43 years old. He's on a new team, first season with the Bucs, and he's leading them to the divisional. I think ultimately he will beat the Saints next week, but we'll see. But Tom Brady just keeps proving every week that he is still elite and he's still one of the top quarterbacks in the league. Next game was Ravens-Titans. They've kind of formed this rivalry over the weeks and over the years. I did not see the Ravens winning this, but Ravens pulled it through 20-13. Titans played really bad. Derrick Henry only had 18 carries for 40 yards. That's almost unheard of, especially for the rushing leader. He got over 2,000 yards this year, and he goes for 40 yards. And then ultimately the Titans should have won this game, though, because it's 4th and 2 on the Ravens 40, and they decide to punt it. Like, you got to go for that. You're in the 4th quarter, and you're ultimately down 7, and you need to score. Like, that's the time to go for it. That is fourth down territory right there. Like, you have to go for that. But Lamar, 136 rushing yards. It's his first playoff win. He's a running back, in my opinion. I don't think the Ravens will win next week just for the fact that he cannot throw the ball. Like, I don't see how you're an NFL quarterback and you cannot throw the ball to save your life. This dude just runs the ball every chance he gets. I mean, good for you, dude. I'm not a big Lamar fan. I do not really respect him. But someone that really showed up in that game was Hollywood Brown. He had 7 receptions, 109 yards. And we've been kind of waiting for him to kind of show up. So good for him to show up. The next game was Saints versus Bears on Nickelodeon. Saints ended up winning this one 21-9 after a late touchdown by the Bears. Drew Brees, 265 yards, 2 TDs. He played pretty well in this game. I liked how he controlled the ball. He didn't make the dumb play. He was really smart with it. He knows when to hit his check down on Alvin Kamara. So I think Drew Brees earned this win. And ultimately, the Bears' offense was bad. They could not move the ball at all. And the only momentum they had was ultimately whenever Javon Wims drops a wide open touchdown. They also had a lot of mistakes. They had Javon Wims drop touchdown, commit unsportsmanlike that made it a 3rd and 20. Then they had an offsides on 4th and 3, which ultimately ended in a touchdown for the Saints. So, I mean, when you're playing the Saints, you cannot have that many mistakes. You can't go and play a powerhouse like the Saints and expect to win whenever you have mistakes like that. Next game, last game of the wild card weekend, Steelers versus Browns. It was a crazy one for sure. I don't think anybody was expecting a 28-0 start in the first quarter by the Browns. I definitely wasn't. I thought this was going to be a close game, and ultimately the score was a lot closer than what it actually was. I mean, it was actually a blowout, but ultimately the Browns won 48-37. Baker, 263 yards, 3 TDs. Whenever you're Big Ben, you and the Steelers, you do not want to throw the ball 68 times. This dude went 47 of 68, 501 yards, 4 TDs, and 4 picks. When you're the Steelers, you do not want to throw the ball that many times. That is not who you are. But they were down 28-0. They had to throw the ball every single time to even try to have a chance. So ultimately, this was the Browns' first playoff win since 1994. So if I had to choose, I would definitely want the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, just because that's where I go to school, and I like the Chiefs. They're my second favorite team. But if the Chiefs somehow don't win it, or they don't have a chance to win it, I would be fine with seeing the Browns win it. I respect Baker Mayfield. I really like him and Nick Chubb and Jarvis Landry. So we'll see what they can do next week against the Chiefs. But ultimately, the first play from the line of scrimmage just totally set the momentum. And the Browns really never looked back. Pouncey just snaps the ball over Big Ben's head, and that almost never happens. So Browns kind of got lucky in that fashion. And then the next drive, Big Ben throws a pick. Then the next drive, he throws a pick. So the last question I have for this is it time for Big Ben to retire? I think ultimately it is. I think the Steelers need to move on from Big Ben, kind of rebuild. I mean, you have some superstars in Juju, in Chase Claypool, in James Conner, Minka Fitzpatrick. I mean, you have a pretty solid team, but you need to kind of rebuild and move away from Big Ben, in my opinion. So this wild card was a great weekend for NFL football. I enjoyed every minute of it. There wasn't one game that was just awful. The worst game was probably the Saints versus Bears, but even then, I mean, you got to see Hall of Famer Drew Brees do his thing. So ultimately, pretty happy with the wild card weekend. Let's see what happens in the divisional. We'll see you on another episode of Down to the Wire on Wednesday. But don't forget to hit that subscribe, turn on the post notifications, and follow me on the socials.